In 1998, Yahoo reportedly had the opportunity to acquire Google for $1 million US. They passed. At the time, search just didn't seem like a standalone business. It seemed more like a feature, something that would fit into a larger portfolio strategy. 4 years later, Yahoo tried again. But at this point in time, Google wanted $5 billion US. Yahoo hesitated over that valuation, and the deal collapsed. Today, Google is worth more than $1 trillion US. The cost of delay is never linear. It compounds. And here's the dangerous assumption behind delay. We think that if we know more, risk will decrease, uncertainty will shrink, and clarity will actually improve. But in fast-moving markets and in high-stakes careers, uncertainty does not stabilize. It either explodes or it disappears. And if it disappears, so does your opportunity to participate. Decision paralysis is the invisible tax on growth. We don't lose momentum, we don't lose opportunity because we choose wrong. We lose it because we don't choose at all. When I was in high school, I learned very early that mistakes can cost you. I was bullied. And when you're bullied, you start studying the room. You look for cues. You try to predict behavior. You try to gather as much information as you can to predict the next step. So what did I do? I did exactly that. And then I took that information to outwork everybody. I tried to gather as much information as I could. I tried to control as many variables that I could. And I graduated valedictorian, which at the time for a young kid seems like early success in life, right? When in fact, that wasn't success. It wasn't even confidence. It was control. And control can feel eerily similar to certainty. Years later, at the age of 26, I was promoted to the highest ranking exec in one of the largest German luxury fashion companies, which again felt and seemed like success. But what actually resurfaced was that same psychological pattern that I had picked up so early in my life. The contrast was the decisions were bigger, the stakes were higher, I had more visibility. So one would think that I would have learned from the past, when in fact I did what all high performers do. I ran more scenarios. I tried to gather more data. I tried to only make a decision when I felt entirely certain about the potential outcome. What if this strategy is wrong? What if this hire is not the right hire? What if we shouldn't expand? But quite quickly, I came to the realization that leadership does not reward perfect analysis. It rewards momentum. So I had to face an uncomfortable truth. I could try to outwork everybody. I could try to run as many analyses I could possibly run. But that wasn't the actual obstacle in the room. My fear was. The more I worked with founders in fashion and beauty and wellness and tech, brands scaling at rapid speed, I realized this is not just personal. This is actually systemic. I've sat in rooms where the data on the table was there in abundance. The information seemed perfect, and decisions still stalled. Should we expand now or wait another 6 months? Should we rebrand now or never? Should we raise capital or bootstrap? Should we even start this business? The moment when companies collapse, it rarely happens dramatically. It happens because they hesitate. But in markets that move at an algorithmic speed, hesitation compounds. The longer you wait, the more expensive any decision you make will become. But not because the math actually changes, but the context does. So why is this so hard? Why are we facing this feeling of paralysis in the moment of uncertainty? Let's turn to neuroscience for a second. When we face uncertainty as humans, the amygdala, our brain's threat detection system, activates. It tells us to prioritize safety and comfort over progress. Our brain cannot really distinguish between a lion in the wild and a high-stakes decision. Uncertainty triggers a stress response. And when that happens, we freeze. And that's the moment where overthinking feels so incredibly productive. After all, we're just gathering more information, right? We're just looking for more cues to predict a potential outcome of a decision at hand. But here's the paradox. The more ambitious you are, the more successful you're trying to become, the more decisions you will face without perfect certainty. Growth actually increases ambiguity. So if you don't learn how to operate under uncertainty, growth and success will become psychologically completely intolerable. Let's turn to psychology. Daniel Kahneman has coined the famous principle of loss aversion. He has shown that humans tend to weigh losses higher than gains. We simply think that the pain of losing looms so much larger than the pleasure of potentially gaining something. So when we face a decision, we don't weigh the downside and the upside against each other equally. We overweigh the failure. We overweigh the risk of choosing wrong. And that's exactly when paralysis wins. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos offers a completely different perspective. He hypothesizes we can actually categorize decisions into two types. Type 1, permanent, irreversible, high stakes. Type 2, impermanent and reversible. We as humans have a tendency to assume that the majority of decisions are actually type 1, when in fact, the majority of decisions are type 2. However, if we think something is irreversible and permanent, what do? We freeze. We try to gather more information. The biggest leap of my life came when I founded my own company. There was no perfect spreadsheet. There was no outcome that I could predict. There was a simple moment of thinking, what do I do? And of course, the question came into my head, what if I'm wrong? What if I choose to leave stability for uncertainty? And then a different question emerged. After all, I had learned something from the past. The question that came into my head was, what happens if I don't choose? What happens if I stay? Not because it's right, but after all, it's a comfort zone. It feels safe. And so I chose. I started the business. But not because fear wasn't present, not because I was certain, but I refused to let fear make the decision for me. The fear of being wrong does not disappear as your life expands. It simply evolves. And it looks so strategic and so intellectual. And also, it feels more socially acceptable because after all, you're just gathering more information. You're trying to make an informed decision. But it is still fear. And it can still choose for you. So how do we actually override it? I want to share with you a 3-step framework that has helped me to overcome almost any decision-making fear over the course of my life as an entrepreneur. Step 1, name the fear. It's as simple as that. Ask yourself honestly, are you trying to gather more information or are you just trying to protect yourself from discomfort in this very moment? Are you trying to protect your future or are you just trying to hide away from the intensity of the moment of decision-making? That clarity right there reduces the anxiety and the intensity of that very moment. Step 2, re-rank the risk. We obsess over choosing wrong. We obsess over failure and trying to avoid it. When in fact, we should obsess over the cost of not choosing. We should obsess over the cost of delay. What opportunity compounds without you? What momentum actually slows? Which competitor moves first? What version of you, or your idea, your business, will never materialize because you chose too late? Step 3, decide and iterate. Use the outcome of your decision as data. Use the movement that you create as feedback. Standing still will give you nothing. Realize that certainty is usually a result of a decision. It's rarely its prerequisite. So think about your own life for a moment. Is there a decision you've been postponing? A bold move, a pivot, maybe even just a small conversation that you need to have, but you're dreading it? Ask yourself honestly, are you protecting your future? Or are you just trying to create the illusion of perfect certainty? Because fear remains the single biggest inhibitor to growth, both personal growth and professional growth. But it's not because we choose wrong. It's because we don't choose at all. And as I said, if we don't choose, fear chooses for us. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's the assessment that something else is more important than fear. Courage isn't certainty. It's prioritization. It's the understanding that movement matters more than comfort. And that making a decision is more important than making the right decision. Momentum matters more than your ego. So society's next chapter requires us to understand these principles. Because we don't need more analysis, and we also don't need more optimization. We need the courage to stay agile in the eye of uncertainty. So the next time you hear yourself asking, what if I'm wrong? Ask yourself something more dangerous. What if I don't choose at all? Thank you.